Hi. Today I'm going to talk about um, development, and this is going to continue off of a different video I did called Medieval Economics. And um, we're going to talk now. The thing with development, I got to say, is that first of all, it's hard to say there's particularly one thing that you can point your finger on and say this is the common trajectory of how a nation state develops, whether that's economically or through its institutions. But we're going to look at an aspect of one book that talks about more of the private sector and how they developed, and the other aspect of the public sector, mainly, how you pay government employees. So I'm going to, talk about the Anglo-American trajectory or tradition, and we will start with this often referenced book, The British Industrial Revolution from a Global Perspective by Bob Allen. And this book talks about, I would say the main point is that the excess of coal and then also high wages in the British economy during the modern period. So coal is cheap energy, and as Bob Allen calculates in this book, the British public or the English public had higher wages or standards of living going back a long time. And he calculates this, the meat consumption that people eat, it was more costly, if you think about food resources, of why that standard of living, we could consider it slightly higher than other parts of, say, Europe or the world. So, wages cost a little bit more in England, and then there is this cheap coal. Now, during the early modern period, there was this thing called the Little Ice Age, and there was an overconsumption of timber and wood, to say, make charcoal to heat someone's home. So, supply and demand, they were running out of wood in England during the Tudor period. So they left with not much left of that, so they used coal. Now, the problem with using coal to heat your home, at least when you have a medieval hearth as your central heating unit, is that all that poisonous smoke goes up, fills your whole house, and you can get very sick. So they had to develop special chimneys that, so it could heat the house, and then all the smoke could go up into the sky, into the ozone, rather than one's house. And there were some trade-offs. You couldn't smoke bacon with a coal heated house. So this was sort of this alternative, and this availability of lots of coal to heat people's homes. So this availability of coal, later, it took about a century, but people started developing machines like the steam engine and other things that could be powered through coal. Now, the other important aspect of this is that when there's high wages, that creates an incentive to create technology. So people don't just, at least you might invent a new piece of technology, but for it to shape the economy, there has to be an economic incentive. So those high wages England had, that was the incentive. So you think today, if someone, I don't know, owns a McDonald's franchise and they're thinking about using touch screen, there's some other new technological development to put in a restaurant, but it's a big cost to invest in that technology. It would be you know, really effective. But the thing is it costs a lot of money. So if you pay, everyone minimum wage, and that works at your restaurant, and then is that cheaper, or is investing in the technology, this expensive technology, and then not having to pay more workers? So, the difference, I often hear people say if, McDonald's unionized, they would switch over to touchscreens, because if you're paying, the difference is if you're paying someone like, $8 an hour or $10 an hour versus if you have to pay them $20 an hour, you're gonna, that's the breaking point between why you invest in technology. I think even the Tao Te Ching talks about the role of technology, not really making people's lives better, but just helping centralize control from a higher authority. We tend to, we get a lot of marketing and stuff talking about how great technology is, and it is great. I mean, I'm filming a video, it's on the internet, so, so that's sort of one of the main things. And even GDP growth, when you go back to old times, I think 1600s and back, economists have calculated that GDP growth, productivity growth, was never more than like 0.1 to 0.2%. And then even during the British Industrial Revolution, the late 18th century, was never more than 0.4 to 0.8 or something GDP growth. Those, what we expect today is increasing GDP growth didn't happen that way. People didn't invest in like research and development. Typically, if a nation state wanted to increase its wealth, they would just go attack and conquer someone and expand their tax base by occupying a new space. So this changed the game in a lot of ways. Is that you could improve in the sophistication or technology of your society, and that's how. And part of it was so you could lay off workers, expensive workers. So there was so that's sort of the main crux of this book, and sort of how things had moved forward. I had also read some other things talking about how in today's world we, maybe the 90s was the last time of real productivity growth with the introduction of computers, and most of the new innovations aren't really so profound. It's a lot of hype. It was electricity and the internal combustion engine that were the two main inventions or whatever that other things could be built off. Once you had electricity, you could use all these, make all these gadgets that used electricity to make your life more productive, or make the economy more productive. But those things have kind of flatlined, at least in developed countries. Other countries that are developing are just, they're following the pattern. They're following this pattern. They're following this pattern. It was the British are considered to be the ones that set the trend, and people had followed suit, and they followed suit once wages got high enough. Other places like nearby France, they didn't. They were not so interested in developing these new technologies because they had cheaper labor. So the labor was more expensive in England versus, say, France, in the 18th or 19th century. So there was a slower incentive. It goes back to that McDonald's example. They could still pay everyone $10 an hour, so it wasn't worth it to invest in the new technology that made things more efficient. So that is kind of the private sector aspect of what I want to talk about. The other, and now the more public sector, and that is salaries and wages. And so I'm going to talk about this book, Against the Profit Motive, The Salary Revolution in American Government, 1780 to 1948, by Nicholas Perillo. And so this book is about how government officials going back to the British system, and Americans inherited that system, is that they were paid a they were paid on commission basically, and so there were certain jobs, like if you were a justice of the peace, you didn't get paid, but if you did a service, the person that you did the service for, say like hold a court case or something, by you would get paid by someone doing it, and sometimes those prices were negotiable. So, you know, to me that actually sounds a lot like a bribe. In some ways, I went to a developing country when I was younger, and they didn't pay the police that much. They had all these roads with like road guards, and because too many people would cram into cars that they were driving, and there would be an accident. All these people would die because they're crammed in cars. So they would have these road guards up to make sure that the cars weren't too packed too tight. But the thing is these guards didn't get paid a living wage. So a lot of times they would take a customary fee, or what other people might call a bribe. Some people could, get, so they would look the other way, or you think about jobs where, or countries where like you want to start a business, and, you go through all the paperwork the formal way. It takes forever and a long time, but if you give someone a bribe, you get, you can set up that business much more quickly. And so, it's all based off of using a government or civil position to profit yourself. And so, within America, there were a lot of different government positions, usually on the local government or state government, that, you would get paid per doing something. So, for example, the Navy got bounties. And that created problems. So if the Navy, if they captured a ship, they would be able to take some of the profits rather than getting a salary, or the booty on the ships. And this, of course, creates problems because, you're going to go fight a naval battle, and someone's going to go for rather than going for the tactical one to win the battle, they're going to go attack the ship probably with the most wealth on it, so that they can profit from doing that. And I don't think it wasn't until the Spanish-American War or something in 1898 that you started to have transition over to salaries and paying people in the Navy a salary instead of just getting these bounties, at sea. There were other things, bounty hunters. So, if it's a profit motive, the bond system, they're going to go down and track down people, and they're going to be more incentivized to capture someone versus get the right person, because they get the bounty based on how many people they catch. Or immigrant processors in New York in the 19th century who, got paid per person they processed into the system. So that means that they would be more incentivized to naturalize as many citizens as possible. That was part of the whole, Tammany Hall machine type situation where, that they would get these immigrants processed, and then they would become members of a particular political party, in this case the Democratic Party, and then, the person processing the immigrants would get paid more per one, and then, the machine boss would get lots more votes. And so that was a problem. And so slowly over time, the government had to switch over to paying people salaries, because these certain jobs, they saw that giving them a profit motive was actually hindering or doing damage to what they were really doing. If you want to nationalize citizens the right way, or, run an effective Navy that's not going to just chase after the most valuable cargo ships, that's, you switch over to a salaried system. So those were just some different thoughts I had about the development process and how nation states and how people's reason and logic, and how we've come to this complex world today. And again, like I said, development is a complicated thing. It's how countries develop, and what order and how things go. It's it's not, to me, it's not a linear line. There's all sorts of different factors and components going in. I wish I could make more comparisons between the two books, but I haven't really found any quite clear things other than incentive and motivation. So there you have it. There's a little talk.